Hello, I'm Tom and I'm the maintainer of Django Tenants. In this video I'm going to explain what Django Tenants is and how to get Django Tenants up and running. So first of all, what is Django Tenants? If you've ever found yourself needing to create a software as a service Django app where you need to separate your client's data from another one of your client's data, then Django Tenants is for you. You could get away without Django Tenants. However, would always be a risk of cross-contaminating your customer's data. You could put an ID on every single model that is referencing client data and then do queries to limit each customer's data. However, this would be at a risk that you would get cross-contamination of data. Another way would be to create an individual database for your customers. So customer A has a database, customer B has a database. Sounds really good, but Django doesn't really support this way. Or you could use Postgres schemas. So what are Postgres schemas? Postgres schemas are like databases inside Postgres. By default, you always use in a Django project a schema called public. Now with Django Tenants, you can have many schemas, but it still belongs to the same database. So that is what Django Tenants allows you to do. So how does Django Tenants know what schema to use? There's two ways of setting Django Tenants up. Let me explain. So one way is to use subdomains. So in this example here, I've got company1.test.com. This would go to the company1 schema. And this one here would go to company2 schema. So that's how subdomain way work. But there is another way, which is to use part of the URL. You have to give it a specific prefix at the start, which there's a setting that you put in the settings file. And then you can specify what schema. So in this example, company1 and company2. For my demo, I will be using subdomains like this. So we're now ready to create our sample application. I will be creating an imaginary sweet shop where each one of my customers sells sweets. I will be using Docker and PyCharm. PyCharm is just my preferred IDE. So let's begin. So I've already created the Django project and installed Django Tenants using pip. So there's a few settings that we've got to do, but before we do that, we're going to create a new app. So I'm going to go to Docker and I'm just going to run Python manage py start app client. So we've now got client as a new app. The new client app will be used to store all the information about each tenant. Django Tenants require 2 models to be added. So I'm going to go to the models file and add the 2 models. To do this for ease, I'm just going to paste them in from Django Tenants help. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it in. For the ease of this demo, I do not need paid until, on trial and created on. So I'm going to remove those from this this model. You will notice that the client model is based off tenant mixin, and the domain model is based off domain mixin. There are extra fields created when you create the client model, and extra fields that are created when you create the domain model. These are required. So the next thing I need to do is change some Django settings. So I'm going to go to my Django settings file. The first setting I'm going to change is the database engine. You have to change the database engine to the specific Django Tenants version. So I'm just going to get that setting. I'm going to put it in here. So it's Django _tenants dot PostgreSQL _ backend. The next setting that I've got to put in is a database router. So I'm just going to put that anywhere in here. So I've done that one, and that's Django Tenants .routers .tenants sync router. The next one is probably one of the most important ones, which is the middleware. So let's check that I haven't already got middleware already in here. Let me just check. I've already got middleware. Now Django Tenants middleware, there's different versions of it, but I'm just going to use this bog standard one. Please see the documentation for the differences, but it's required to be at the very top or as high as possible in the list. So I've got Django Tenants .middleware .main .tenant main middleware. You might need to create your own middleware to do specific stuff. Basically, the middleware redirects from the subdomain to the correct tenant. So that's really important. Worth looking at that code. So the next one to do is the shared app and the tenant app. Basically, there's two kinds of apps. So we have to split this installed apps into two parts. So the first thing to do is to change this to shared apps. These are apps that are shared between every single tenant and also available in the public tenant. So I put shared apps, and now I need tenant apps. So I'm going to copy that and make it tenant apps as well. In shared apps, we need to put Django _tenants. Let's put that. And that needs to be as high as possible in the shared apps. We need to still have installed apps, but it needs to be made up of both the shared apps and the tenant apps. So this is the line that's required. Now there's two other lines that are really important. That's where the domain module is listed. The domain model and the tenant domain model. So the tenant model and the tenant domain model. So we need to put these somewhere. Let's put those there. And they are in client, right, and they go there. We also need to put in, of course, the client model into our shared app. Right, so the next thing to do is let's see if it actually runs. That's a good sign, it does run. So now I'm going to do a migration. So I'm going to go to command prompt, make migration. Migrations is created too, and let's go to and migrate. So I've done the migration. At the moment we have no tenants created, but if you look, there is a management command called create tenant. We're going to run that, but before we do, I'm going to show you there is no tenants created at the moment. And if you look in schemas in pgadmin, I've just got really the one called public. The cron and this one are system ones. So we're just going to move this out of the way, and we're going to run create tenant. So the schema name we're going to say is demo. Name is demo, and domain we're going to have demo dot local host. If you use anything at local host, you will find that works on your own computer, on your local host computer. You don't. I used to have to modify the host file, but using .localhost means you don't have to modify the host file. Is it primary? Yes, it is. So we should see in here now. Reload. I should have done refresh rather than reload. You have now got a schema called demo. At the moment you'll find it's only got a few tables and nothing of interest at the moment. As we're creating software as a service for sweet shops, we need two new apps, one which is tenanted and one which is shared. So let's create those two new apps. Python manage.py start app suite underscore shared. And another one called sweet tenant. Doesn't need the word tenant on the end, but it's quite a useful way to distinguish that it is a tenanted app. So that's two new apps done. Now we need to add those apps to the installed app, so I'm just going to go and do that. So the shared one will go in shared. So suite underscore shared, and in the tenant one, suite underscore tenant. So the next thing to do is we need to go and add the models to those apps. So I'm just going to go to the models. I've already typed them out, so I'm just going to paste them in. So this is in the shared one, and I want suite type. Oh, I want to keep that line there. Suite type, and I want to go into the other app, the tenanted one, and I want to put suite. Let's move that. You'll notice the suite one has a link to the shared app. Suite type has a link. This has a link to suite. So let's go and import that. So that's now imported. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the migrations. So let's go and do that. Go in here to Python manage.py, make migrations. It's created two new migrations, one in shared and one in not shared. Now if we do a migrate, you'll find this is quite interesting. So it's run both migrations, but it's run it twice because we've got once for the public tenant and once for the demo tenant. If we had lots, it would run the migrations for every single one. So yes, you could argue if you've got 100 tenants, it could take some time to run all the migrations across all those tenants. However, there is a way of doing the migrations in parallel. That's in the documentation, so which does speed it up. So I'm now going to create a couple of users to log into Django admin. The first user I'm going to create is the one for the public area, and the second user I'm going to create is just for the tenant demo. So let's create the normal user. So let's go python manage.pro create super user, and I'm gonna might as well call that root. That's fine, and I'm just going to put a password. Hopefully I'll let this password. Oh, yes, I want to bypass that. So now we're going to create one just for the tenant of demo. So let's go python manage.py, and we need to run this one, create tenant super user. Python manage.py create tenant super user. So you can press a question mark which will list all the schemas out, but in this case I just want the schema of demo because I've only got one schema. I'm going to put the username to demo, and I'm going to put a password in. Yes. So I've created one super user for the public and one super user for the demo. So I'm now going to bring over pgadmin and show you what those users are in here. So if we look in here, we've got demo, which is our demo app, and we look at auth users in here and go view all rows. You will notice there's a username in there of demo because that's what we create it as. If we look at the public tenant and go to auth users in here and go view all data, you'll see there's one called root. So that's done that part. So I'm now going to go and set the Django admin up. So I'm just going to go into the admin file of suite shared, and I'm already typed this up earlier. So I'm just going to paste it in. So we've got a suite type admin, nothing special about this at all. And we go to the other one of suite, and I put in that. Nope, I do need the includes. So as I said, nothing special with this. So we're now going to view that. To view it, we need to split the URLs file into two URLs files, one for public and one for tenanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URLs file and put this to URLs public, and we're going to go now to the settings file and add a couple of lines in. So we just need to find in here where the URLs file is defined. It should be in here. Right, here it is. So we just need to add this line here. Change that to dtdemo.urls public. So we now got this URLs file here, which is used for tenanting apps, and this URL here, which is used for the public. So let's go and run this. So the next thing to do is try and load the tenant up in a web browser. So I'm just going to bring my web browser over, and what we're going to enter is demo.localhost:8009, because that's the port I've got. Remember, we put the domain name when we created the tenant to demo.localhost. So just press enter on that, and congratulations, you got to your tenant. If we go here and put in a random tenant name, you'll notice the tenant isn't found. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to put /admin at the end. We're going to log in with demo and my password. And you notice I'm now logged in. What I'm going to do now is go to www.localhost. So I'm just going to do that. And if you look, we get an error. This is correct. By default, Django Tenants will show you a page 404 error if you go to a tenant that doesn't exist. You can change this behavior by either modifying the middleware and having your own local copy, or in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a setting into the settings file called show public if no tenant is found. Now we're going to run it. Now we're going to log in. We're going to go to root. Just put my password in. And you'll notice we're now logged in to the public tenant admin. You will notice that you cannot modify suite type. This is because it doesn't exist in the public apps. It only exists in tenanted apps. So first of all, we're going to add some suite types. So we're just going to add bar, as in chocolate bar, and we're going to add some candy. You'll notice that this doesn't actually work. I'm just going to quickly fix that. So I'm just going to go into here, go to models, and I'm just going to add the right code, which I've got here. And that is now fixed. Right, so what we're going to do now is go back to our tenanted app. And you will see in here, you can modify the public data, but we can also go here and go to suites. We can now add a suite. We can say it's part of a bar, and we'll say it's a choc, and that's do for the moment. We don't need to add any more. What we're now going to do is we're going to create a tenant. We're going to do that on the command line again. So we're going to add another tenant. So we're just going to go Python manager create tenant, and the tenant we're going to have as demo2, demo2.localhost. Yes, that is primary. You can have multiple domains per tenant, which is actually quite useful. That's why the tenant table is separate to the client table. So what we're now going to do is just create a super user. create tenant super user, and again you should now see 2 tenants in here. So I'm going to say tenant 2. I'm going to open my user called use that, and I'm going to do QWERTY as my password. It will moan at me, yes. Right, so I've now created another tenant. If you look, if I go to that tenant and log in, so it was demo2 and QWERTY as the password, you will notice that I can see suites. However, there's no suites in here because this is why the data is separated. And you can see there's still suite types. So if we go in here, we can say there's a candy, and we can just say pink. So that's really Django admin setup with Django Tenants. To do views, it's really simple. All we would need to do is go to the URLs file and just add normal views. It's no different to any other part of Django, and queries are really no different either. So that's really Django Tenant setup. So I think I've shown you enough in this video to get you going. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. It really does help me. Thank you very much. Bye bye.